You said you wanted to pass them out or something?
I was gonna take pictures of them and put them on the report. I can do that next week though,
Okay.
or I'll bring.
All right. Testing, testing. Testing. It looks like it's picking it up on the Teams transcriptions.
So they can hear you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Naomi, for letting me know.
The HDMI?
I don't think so.
Why is it doing that? Oh god. Very sorry.
Okay.
Okay, there. I don't know why I was freaking out. Okay, one more thing. Mute yourself on your computer.
Good. No. We needed to start like 5 minutes ago, but that's okay. Introductions will be short. That's what I needed to figure out next. Yep. What'd you say? Yeah. It'll be 90 seconds. 90 seconds. And then that's good. Don't even need 5 seconds. Yep. Introduce themselves in wherever they want. They don't get any extra time, just for instructions. 60 seconds. Correct. It'll just be 1 if we even get to 1 at this point, so we'll see. Hi everybody, we're looking to get started in about 2 minutes. If you can all find a spot to sit, grab pizza or water if you need, and then we'll get ready to go. Thank you. Yeah. Typing in quorum isn't going to get me anywhere, is it? Typing in quorum.
Oh. You don't have it favorited as quorum?
I
You want to wait up
had...
font? With big dogs. For like all of 5 seconds.
That's totally fine.
We'll get the video.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about
It works.
Are we assuming it's been done?
I think it's been done.
Are you sharing your text?
Not on purpose.
One of his biggest things was like
Yeah, that terrifies me.
All right, we're going to get started with our Senate leadership reports, which will go by pretty quickly, and then we'll do a quick introduction and get started with candidates and ballot measure advocates.
All right, so really quick, please don't be, this is for senators in ASUW. Please don't be afraid to ask questions, give comments, and propose amendments on legislation. As we saw last week, the last couple of bills that we considered and passed were passed really quickly and barely any commentary was given on them, even with like the consolidation of first and second readings. And leadership is we discussed this in steering yesterday. We're gonna be hosting an interactive forum on this next week to discuss strategies going forward. And we're gonna be seeing a huge influx of legislation in the coming weeks. So please make sure to read bills ahead of time, especially the soda bill. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should pay more attention. In preparation for next week, because we adjourned early under the assumption that everyone would be reading it ahead of time. On top of that, there are a ton of jobs open right now on Handshake for the Bean Basket, Gender Equity Commission, Student Disability Commission, Office of Inclusive Design, Arts and Entertainment, Asian Student Commission, Bike Shop, American Indian Student Commission, and the Queer Student Commission. And most of these close in a week or 2 weeks. So please apply and come to me if you want any help. Also, we'll be going over the Senate election schedule soon. Next week. If you're interested in running, some senators have already come to me for advice. We highly recommend asking any of us for advice. And also the clerk is hired, so that will happen after elections. Lastly, everyone, please thank Jacob for pretty much single-handedly planning this forum. This is the first time, I believe, we've hosted a joint Senate's forum, which is a pretty big feat. All right.
Hey gang, just as a notice, there's not going to be any new senators today that I'll be announcing because I didn't want to introduce any new senators in this irregular environment, but attendance will still be counted. Jacob will announce an attendance vote, I believe, during intermission, so keep an eye out for that. I will not be very flexible with the attendance policy. We'll have a Senate bonding this quarter, I promise. I'll talk about it more next week. Need to keep this quick. And I did want to share some legislation writing resources. I know there were a lot of bills that are being drafted right now, so let's just go through. On the website, if you hover over what we do and choose legislative database, that's every single resolution that we've passed. At the top, that notice for resolutions this year, but if you go to the legislative session to view, you can see last year, the year before, etc. And then if you're on the teams, and by the way, if you're not on the team, just sending me an email and I'll make sure you are. You can go to this resources tab up here, and then it'll lead here, and then you just scroll down, and legislative research guide, legislation template, etc. For the research guide, this is everything that's in it. There's citation, advice for who to reach out to, faculty, administration, ASUW positions, and then general links and resources for news, general information about UW, ASUW, etc. And it's just a very helpful advice. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Eric and Andal. With that, we'll get started with the main part of our meeting, and I will call this meeting to order at 5:09. Okay. Do I see any motions? Henry? Henry moves to approve the agenda. Are there any seconds? Julia seconds. Okay, we'll do a raised hand vote. First, any objections? With no objections, okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those against? And all those abstaining? Okay, the motion is approved, and we will move on to the land acknowledgement. The ASUW Student Senate acknowledges the indigenous peoples of this land and the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations, and the Duwamish peoples whose land our university currently occupies. It is our role and responsibility as guests to understand how our impact entangles the caretakers. If there are any announcements, you're welcome to unmic on Teams or come up to the podium here and you can use one of the two podium mics. Otherwise, we'll move forward. Yes, Ria.
Hey guys, most of you know we're having the ASUW fair on April 18th, so just make sure you RSVP. We have like a lot of fun stuff, and during the elections, 21st, 23rd, we have coupon incentives like $1 glassy, 20% off ebook store, and one free uploading game. So just make sure to vote. Go Ducks!
All right, just looking for any other hands for announcements or public comment. Awesome. Okay. Then we'll get started with our forum. Welcome to the Board of Directors Joint Senate Forum held by both the ASUW Student Senate, kind of coordinated by our steering committee and the GPSS Executive Committee. First of all, so we already completed our call to order, and attendance will come later during the intermission, but we're going to get started off with ballot measures. And I just want to make sure that everybody knows in the next like 5 to 10 minutes as we get started, please go to the website and cast your quorum vote. It's kind of rolling, and since our entire meeting is forums, it doesn't have any binding effect, but it just makes sure that we keep track of this meeting for public records purposes. Thank you for that. And so just a little bit about how this is going to work. We'll have hopefully 3 questions per candidate and 10 minutes of speaking time for our ballot measure advocate, and that'll come with a little bit of question and answer time if there's any left over after the presentation. For candidates, one of the questions was drafted by the Senate Steering Committee, like I said before, and that'll be 90 seconds. One question was written by the GPS Executive Committee, that's also 90 seconds, and then we may have time for up to 1 question submitted by the audience. And so I will scroll over to this window, and if you will scan this QR code at the beginning of the meeting right now, then you'll have the availability to access that for the rest of the meeting, and you can kind of submit questions as you think of them as we move through the different positions. You're welcome to submit for all 8 board of directors as well as for the ballot measure advocate in advance. That way they're ready and set for us to go when we get to those positions. I'll give about 5 seconds to scan that QR code. And I'll also put it back up on the screen every time we get to an audience question segment. Okay. With that, I will call up our ballot measure advocate for ballot measure A, Julia Santamaria.
Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Yes, great, perfect. Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Julia Santamaria. I am the ballot measure advocate for ballot measure A. I am also a representative of Washburn, which is a student activism club on campus. We hope to represent the Husky student interest at the local, state, and federal levels of government. So here today, I'm going to talk about why this ballot measure is important to us, what it helps us do. Basically, everybody here has registered for classes before, yes? When you go to register for classes, everybody knows how there's that little button before you register that says, do you want to donate $5 to an organization, right? We are one of those organizations on that list. This ballot measure would allow us to keep collecting voluntary donations from the student body in the future, and it funds everything that we do. Washburn has been around since 1974. One of the reasons why we have been able to continue for more than 50 years on campus is because we're able to hire full-time staff. Without that money, it's impossible for us to have this kind of longevity, this kind of coordination that we keep together. It also allows us to lobby for bills on behalf of the student body. For example, we recently added an amendment to the Balanced Billing Protection Act in 2025, which makes it so that ground ambulance costs are capped in Washington state for all residents. We also helped lobby to block I-2117, which is an initiative that would have repealed the Climate Commitment Act, which is designed to reduce greenhouse gases in Washington state by 95% by 2050. We registered 461 people to vote last fall before the election. And we currently have the Recycling Reform Act on the governor's desk waiting to be signed after about 5 years of lobbying, which would make it so that plastic responsibility is shifted onto the producer for packaging waste. And then there would be a tax if they use too much plastic in their packaging. That tax then goes to reforming recycling in Washington state. None of this is possible without us having proper funding, access to funding, without us being able to have students have an outlet to donate voluntarily to Washburn. So, yeah, that's where all the money goes to, and we would really appreciate passing this ballot measure.
All right, thank you. And if you'll just stay up here, we can use these microphones for our audience questions. And I am waiting for any questions. I think if any are submitted, let me know if they're not popping up on the screen. And we'll go with whatever comes up first and or receives the most upvotes. 80? Okay.
Questions from the audience.
That works, yeah. If anybody has a question that they're willing to ask just from the room for now while I figure this out, then we can get that answered.
Yes.
Why $5?
So over time, we've upped the fee. So in 1974, it was $1, and then in the 90s, we'd upped it to $3, and now we're upping it to $5. Kind of the same consistency of over like a 20-25 year period. We kind of upped it by $2 just to account for inflation. We believe that $3 just simply doesn't have the impact that it used to back in the 90s, and that students would be willing to donate $5. Usually what we expect is that when we up the fee, there's a little bit of a downtick in people that donate to us, but then that usually goes back up. So we've definitely thought about this. It's just something like $3 doesn't have the buying power it used to. It doesn't buy enough gas to go to Olympia, enough office supplies, enough pizza for if we want to hold a forum. So the $5 really does make a difference.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Yes.
How much do you usually get per quarter?
It really depends on the quarter, but about $8K per quarter from students. People really like donating to us. It's something that people see impact, and they, we hope to represent the student interest as best as possible, and we think that the fact that we have gotten continued active support since 1974 shows that we are. And we, try to consistently ask the student body what they would like us to do as representatives to make sure that we're properly representing them in our government.
Any other questions from the audience? Our Slido is now up and running, so you can also submit online. Okay, well, thank you for sharing about your ballot measure, and I hope that everybody will, we've got one question, so we can take that. How much do you raise annually from this program?
It really depends on the year. We have taken a dip since COVID, but that's just due to visibility reasons. I imagine that people on campus are aware. In the past, we would raise about 30 to 40K a year. That's about on track of where we are right now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions coming through, so thank you so much. And sorry, we'll have to cut it off here. Thank you. All right, next up, we're going to call forward our Director of Programming candidates. And if you can all bring your little placards up, I'll have you sit at this table at the front while you wait, and then each one of you can come up and take your turn. And first up, we have Remy Martin. Okay, it doesn't look like Remy's present today, so we'll go to Owen Rivera. Okay. So how this will work is we will kind of take turns answering each of the questions, and then we'll move on to the next question. So this director is the representative of campus RSOs to the ASUW, especially through their positions on the Finance and Budget Committee, where appropriations are made for RSO events and other spending. They're also the representative for Rainy Dog Radio and Arts and Entertainment. How will you balance these responsibilities with your duty to serve all students' needs in order to promote the experience of less engaged groups?
I think to answer this question, I'd first like to start off with a story. A few people know here, but I'm actually working on the ASUW fair that's on Friday. And when I was working on the getting food trucks to the fair, we had a small problem with UW Dining and getting a taco truck. I talked to the taco truck, and there was a little conflict because UW Dining has cantina downstairs. And as someone who's from the Hispanic community, I thought that, there's a small but very strong Hispanic community at UW. And to really make sure that their voices are heard, I want to make sure that students from underrepresented communities can have, their culture be expressed on campus, far so more than before. And I think a good way to do this is, through the Office of Communications, just making sure that when we're planning events, we have, polls, surveys that can let students, come and tell us what they want from our events and how we can include them. Another big thing that I would like to do is I would like to go out to specific, RSOs that have, underrepresented communities and just hear their concerns and what they would like from me, just for inclusion in, these events. Because if we're doing these events and we're not, including communities that are traditionally just underrepresented, I think that it's a really big problem. I love Rainy Day, the Rainy Dog Radio, but I do think that there could be possibly a better way to, promote Rainy Dog and just have it be
Sorry,
served.
that's time.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Okay, next we'll hear from Grace Clark. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. And just a reminder, these questions are 90 seconds for the first two. How will you balance these responsibilities with your duty to serve all students' needs in order to promote the experience of less engaged groups?
Yeah, this is an awesome question. I think it speaks to something that's really central in my platform, which is collaboration. So two main avenues through which I plan to facilitate this collaboration and also uplift these sort of less engaged RSOs is through creating an RSO Discord where RSOs with similar interests can coordinate with each other, collaborate on events, and maybe more experienced RSOs can give some experience to lesser or newer RSOs that have less members and need more experience. And also through the RSO Leadership Summit, where ASUW will develop curriculum and training for RSO leaders to learn how to plan events and properly budget and apply for funding and all these different really important skills that RSOs should be equipped with. So being active in planning those events and coordinating that collaboration is something that's really meaningful to me to allow for a broader expansion of the UW community, but also allow for that accessibility to resources for RSOs. Thank you.
And lastly, for this first question, we have Rhiannon Hayes McQueen, represented by Eric Jacobson. Would you like me to restate the question?
No, thank you. All right, so one part of this question that I'd really like to highlight is the part about serving all students' needs. To this end, Rhiannon is very committed to talking to RSOs, connecting with their leadership, and hosting events to make sure they're aware of what resources and pathways we have to offer through ASUW. But also part of being underrepresented or unengaged is that you may not be a part of an RSO. So Rhiannon really wants to do a quarterly RSO fair to connect people with the community who may not be a part of an RSO currently, as well as some events with some wide appeal. The Fall Fling and Spring Show, our concerts hosted by Arts and Entertainment each year, are very good examples of this, but Rhiannon's also interested in a Cherry Blossom Festival that will be hosted in the spring. Finally, and most importantly, is funding. There's been a lot of funding cuts here, and Rhiannon, as an engineering major, has seen this in the Engineering Discovery Days event, which was defunded and canceled this year. Rhiannon knows that this isn't a problem that's solely confined to the College of Engineering. It's a problem across all departments and across all student groups. And so she's really committed to using the Special Appropriations Fund, which we set aside for RSOs each year, to support the groups that are struggling the most. Ultimately, it's about forming long-lasting relationships, building community, and offering ASUW money to whoever needs it to help anyone in need. Thank you.
All right, we'll bounce back to Owen for the second question. And just a reminder, this one was drafted by GPSS. All right, how will you ensure an equitable event or RSO experience for all students of all backgrounds and identities throughout the year?
Well, I think we need to work really closely with the Office of Inclusive Design. Right now, they're mostly incorporated in our Instagram promotion, but I think we could do more to expand our relationship to having them help us plan events. Making sure that we can get accessibility for disabled students, get translation for international students who may not necessarily speak English, And just working with them closely, as well as our RSO leaders from underrepresented communities to make sure that their voices are heard and their needs are met. Another thing that we can do is help RSOs get funding through ASUW, whether that be with our Office of Communications through promoting their fundraisers, or say having a joint fundraiser with an RSO for an event. But a big problem that we have is that the fund that RSOs can access is only $2,500, and as some of you know, if you want to book a room in Kane, it's around $4,000. So reducing operational costs and putting more money back into RSOs for events that will help students to feel more in place on campus is really, really important. And another way we can do this is by having more often leadership summits where RSO leaders that maybe they come from an underrepresented community, they have a smaller RSO, they can come and get help, they can ask for a joint, say, event with ASUW, and just having a more open, honest communication with us and the RSOs to give them the funding and events that they need. Thank you.
Awesome. I love this question, and equity and accessibility is something that I'm constantly aware of as a student, but as director of programming in particular, I think codifying equity is something that's super important to do within ASUW. So one idea I have is back to that collaboration piece, right, that's so central to my platform. Collaborating with the director of diversity efforts to co-host town halls with student commissions and RSOs to increase engagement in town halls, student engagement in student policy, and also to directly uplift certain student voices that are represented within these commissions. The Office of Inclusive Design is one great example of a student commission, but I think integrating all student commissions into our collaboration with ASUW is a great way to make sure that equity is widespread for all students. So I think also codifying that collaboration with the Office of Inclusive Design, not just suggesting it, but requiring that RSOs and ASUW entities work with the Office of Inclusive Design because they have so many incredible resources, and I think that they're resources that we all need to see more often as students on campus. And I also think too the collaboration efforts that happen within RSOs, as I mentioned in the previous question, with the RSO Discords, creating these channels where currently the Black Student Commission has a Discord where all of the Black Student Commission RSOs are able to collaborate on events and promote themselves. And so I think having that widespread communication through these different communication channels, taking advantage of all of our passion and desire. Oh, thank you.
Hello again. Right, so the points of Rhiannon's that I mentioned earlier for events that really include all people regardless of their backgrounds, these events with wide appeals, that also applies a bit here, but on top of that, Rhiannon is also very committed to talking to the Director of Diversity Efforts, which on UW in Bloom is Taylor Arredondo, and ensuring that we're not just prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also belonging. And there's a lot of events that are diversity commissions host each year, like Drag Show is this Thursday, and Queer Prom was in February, and there's so many good things that our diversity commissions do, but part of representing these groups is looking outside of ASUW and what we already have to offer. And to this end, Rhiannon wants to look into talking to the Ethnic and Cultural Center and its associated RSOs to gauge what their needs are and talk to them about supporting and uplifting them through funding, personnel, and any type of support she can. As a human-centered design and engineering major and an ASL minor, Rhiannon is also very committed to accessibility. One thing that's really important to her is the principle of universal design, which is that accessibility benefits everyone. And this means in-person options, online options, this means transportation, this means ensuring that everyone everywhere can feel included in campus events, no matter how they attend or what background they come from. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to our first audience question at this point. And just so that everybody knows, after we get to the last pre-written question, I'll highlight the one that has the most upvotes, and we'll ask that to each of the candidates. So make sure that you scan the QR code in advance and submit questions so that when we get to that point, the candidates will have a question ready for them. Okay, we'll start with Owen again. And the first question is, a lot of people I've talked to have felt the artists being brought to UW aren't diverse enough or too obscure. What are you going to do to combat that?
Well, that's actually a great question, so thank you to whoever asked it. One way we can help combat this is to basically come up with an initiative where if we're gonna have a concert, we need to make sure it's promoted outside of UW. Because, you know, if we're gonna have people spending money, it's most likely not gonna be, you know, the college students that go here, you know. We need to make sure that we have artists that say, older generations or, you know, people that can just bring communities together. Another thing we can also do is I would like to have a concert, maybe like a battle of the bands for students that are in bands that actually go to UW. You know, people are involved in, you know, music groups that I'm sure they played. I think they played down at the Hub, and I think having, you know, just more students involved in getting our artists out there. But another one thing we can do is just getting involved with the Office of Communications, having polls, asking what kind of artists would you like to see and what kind of music, as well as, yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Awesome. I love this question. I'm a super big music guy and I'm currently involved in our competitive a cappella group on campus. So I'm super passionate about bringing music and the sort of creative experience to campus. Like Owen said, I think definitely centering UW creative groups, UW artists, UW bands is a great way to do that. But back to one of my earlier points, I think codifying that these sort of events like Fall Fling, all of these concerts where we're bringing artists to UW to perform, this should be in collaboration with the Office of Inclusive Design and the student commissions to ensure that artists being brought to our campus are representing a wide variety of music tastes, cultural backgrounds, and all these different experiences that make up our UW community. So I think it's important to have student feedback, especially when a group like Arts and Entertainment are planning these events. I think incorporating other student commissions would be a great way to mitigate this and make sure that we're all including, all of the tastes on our campus. So, thank you.
And just so all the candidates know, we have a laptop down in this direction that'll have the countdown for each question.
Right, so I agree a lot with what Grace was talking about in involving student commissions. Last year, when the Joint Commissions Committee was talking about potentially doing the drag show that year, there was discussion within JCC in its open meeting about, between the different commissions about like, Donna, the Black Student Commission director last year, like they asked Donna like, are there any Black drag queens that you know or that your commission would be interested in contacting? And I think this sort of approach where, like Grace said, we talk to the commissions, but not only that, but there's like these collaborative spaces where not only JCC events are benefiting from this, but also every ASUW event where the director of programming is going into the Joint Commissions Committee or whenever there's a big event and talking to them, how can your communities be best represented in this event? How can your communities feel best included and in this event, and how can we foster belonging in UW? Thank you.
Awesome job to our Director of Programming candidates. That'll be the end of that position. And next, I will call up our Campus Partnerships Directors. All right, over the past year, this position has served a vital role in reestablishing relationships with legacy organizations of the ASUW, like UW Athletics and the University Bookstore. What does a strong campus partnership look like to you, and how will you foster these relationships? Please use a legacy organization as an example or propose a new partnership in your response.
Thank you for the question. Hi guys, my name is Moti. I'm running for Director of Campus Partnerships, so I happen to be here. So, what a strong partnership looks like to me is, for one, it's consistent, student-focused, and communication should be regular, because oftentimes I feel like there's a lot of resources at the school, but they wait for you to come to them instead of coming to you. So it's important that we're proactive with our communication. And so one of my one of my initiatives is I want to work with the university bookstore and actually launch a bookstore rewards program. And in doing so, I want to increase civic engagement by providing discounts and providing incentives for those who attend like ASUW town halls are like volunteering, because a lot of me and my members on my ticket were trying to increase engagement in some of these town halls. So I think it's important to incentivize and allow people to come and make their decisions.
Thank you. Next up, we have Caroline. Would you like me to read the question again? Okay. What does a strong campus partnership look like to you, and how will you foster these relationships? Please use a legacy organization as an example or propose a new partnership in your response.
Yeah, so hi all, I'm Caroline. A strong campus partnership is definitely built off of a foundation of collaboration. That's pretty obvious, but if we're not constantly collaborating with the organizations that we partner with, those partnerships will just fall apart. So one of the ways that I want to foster a partnership with one of the legacy organizations that ASUW partners with, the University Bookstore, is by establishing a sustainably made clothing line with the bookstore. This would also rope in UW Sustainability, which this position also liaisons to and partners with. So the bookstore, as you all may know, has been a really long-standing partnership with the ASUW. We partnered with them, I think, since 1907, so for over 100 years. And by creating this sustainably made clothing line, that collaboration would continue. And yeah.
Thank you, Caroline. And last for this question, we have Cranston. And as we get to this response in the next few, make sure that you continue submitting questions. All right, what does a strong campus partnership look like to you, and how will you foster these relationships? Please use a legacy organization in your response or propose a new partnership.
Yeah, so my background, is this mic okay? So my background, I've done a lot of ASUW work just over the past year, and I agree a lot with what Moti said all about how a lot of the services on campus and how admin and the greater UW can support us is really kind of up there. It's a little bit jaded and it's a little bit hard to access, especially when you're just looking for resources in the first place. And I think a strong campus partnership, well, I'll talk more about how I want to transform the role in the sense that one of the main sticking points of my campaign is that the UW PD is trying to roll out a mental health crisis response team. And it's really important that this looks like an equitable initiative where a lot of unarmed officers are able to respond properly to mental health crises instead of officers who are untrained just walking away. And so I think there's a big opportunity here to keep building our relationship with REACH, the nonprofit that they are subcontracting from to find caseworkers. And there's a big opportunity really to just make it more accessible. I think you really have to go searching for resources such as mental health help. Even when you're trying to access a counseling appointment, it can take up to 10 days, and there's just a lot of accessibility problems in that. And I think a strong campus partnership is when an organization that exists to serve students actually exists to serve all students. Thank you.
All right, we'll go back to Moti for the next question. Our question from GPSS is, what specific steps will you take to strengthen communications between ASUW and the legacy organizations that we work with?
Yeah, so first off, I would want to develop a legacy partnership rep system where I have a point of contact for some of these legacy partnerships. That way it'd be easier to follow up and communicate and see what's going on with the different partnerships and their own endeavors. And then I would want to do quarterly check-ins just so that way I can stay proactive and get a better sense of what's going on and how I can better help them fulfill their initiatives. And then this last one was very important. I would do a legacy collaboration calendar, and this could be shared through a newsletter, through email. That way everyone, not only in the ASUW, but other entities can know what's going on with the legacy partnerships. And also it can foster collaboration because 9 times out of 10, a lot of the events, clubs are doing, like they're doing similar stuff. So it's often easier to save money or even like increase turnout by having these collab events and having them together. So yeah.
So the way that, sorry, I'll start over. Establishing strong communication, I think, is definitely easier said than done. Obviously, I'm sure every person that's ever campaigned for this job has said, I want to keep strong communication. But it's definitely like, I think the way to do it is just to frequently keep up with it. I think you can never be too annoying. So maybe bi-weekly emails, constantly reaching out to all partnerships, asking ways that we can collaborate with them or if they have any collaboration ideas with us. On top of that, I would love to have probably maybe like a monthly meeting with all partnerships to kind of discuss that as well in person, since an email can kind of seem cold and anonymous sometimes. So honestly, frequent communication, I think, is the way to go. And yeah, thank you.
It's hard going last because I agree a lot with the points made earlier. But I think in terms of specific steps, it's really tough to look at things like UW counseling, live well, health and safety related partners without also trying to spread out that information more just because of privacy concerns, FERPA, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's going to be really important to have a director of campus partnerships who is committed to looking through kind of how we can subvert this red tape around a lot of the initiatives that I want to undertake particularly. And I really think that I really do want to communicate more with the student body. I can kind of see where this question came from. I think us being the de facto representatives of student interests kind of lays it all down on us in the sense that how do we make sure that students still get the support that they need by the UW? And my answer to that is I will keep advocating. I will make sure that the DCP can find avenues and areas where students can feel more supported no matter what happens at the state, at the federal level. And I really want to work hard to make sure that that happens and that we're not just going to skirt that and let another year pass by under this administration. Thank you.
All right. And it looks like our audience question will be, aside from communication, how will you drive partnership? And we'll start with Moti again.
Yeah, so I like this question because, communicating can often be so easy. It's so easy to send out a mass email or a bunch of newsletters, and 9 times out of 10 people won't actually look at it. But for a lot of us candidates here today, a big goal of ours is to bridge that gap between ASUW and the general student body. So I think it's really important as an ASUW representative to go to these different events and actually put your face out there and outreach that way and build interaction like that, because that's more natural than just me sending out a mass email, because they're not going to maybe recognize my face. And so just being intentional with your outreach can be very pivotal towards doing all this. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I kind of already touched on it, but really I think collaboration is the #1 way to drive partnership. But I also do agree, definitely putting your face out there, going to events, especially I think involving ASUW more with RSOs. Right now it is kind of, I guess, almost like a transactional relationship with RSOs, because most of our relationship is giving them funding for events, which is great. But I think it would also be awesome to directly collaborate with RSOs more, and definitely the #1 way to do that is just to have, yeah, just putting yourself out there, being present all around campus at different events. So yeah.
This is a good question. I think within the stated roles of the Director of Campus Partnerships, it focuses a lot on being the student liaison, and that's kind of a blanket term. I think it will require a lot of being active in committee meetings with the U-District partnership with UW-PD and other health and safety partners. But to really drive partnership, I think it's going to be a big concerted effort to look into how we can reach students that we can or we have not previously reached. I think that a lot of commuter students, a lot of transfer students kind of struggle when they get here just because it's harder, either they're at more sparse times of the day or they don't feel supported by the programs just because they don't know how to access them. So I think there's going to be a lot of on the ground work to be done. And there's also going to be a big part of advocacy that plays a role in this. But thank you to the organizers. Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you to our Director of Campus Partnerships candidates. At this point, we'll move on to the Director of Community Relations. And if I could actually have all of the candidates for this position come up to the stage, I think it'll help us move things along a little bit faster. You can just hold them. Okay. This office represents each of the living communities at the University of Washington, including those in HFS's dorms and apartments, those on Greek Row, and those living throughout the U-District and beyond. What steps will you take to ensure perspectives are included from each of the communities you represent, despite perhaps not being a part of each of them yourself? And for this question, we'll start off with Tanya.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Tanya Bandari and I'm running for Director of Community Relations. Really glad to be here. I think this is a really important question, mainly because when you look at the title of Director of Community Relations, our constituents are international students, they're transfer students, they're commuter students, and I know very few, if any, students that fill all of those different spaces that are part of all of those different groups. But it's still my job to do my very best to represent those groups. And so I think you have to go beyond communication. You have to go beyond marketing and reaching out and sending emails and talking to these different demographics. You have to show up actively and be in their spaces. And since this is a joint Senate's forum, which is really exciting, I'll use that example. I'm serving right now as General Affairs Committee Chair, which is wonderful, and I'm so privileged to interact with a lot of great senators. But it took me attending some hall council meetings and interacting with different groups of senators in spaces that I had to go and make my way, make the time to go out and sort of interact with those folks to understand a lot of the different pieces of legislation they're working on or the different issues in their residential buildings. And it's really important, I think, to take initiative and create those spaces, but also be in those spaces. And I'm really excited to do that. Next year, there are a lot of communities and a lot of amazing folks here on campus. And again, it's so important to go beyond just communicating, beyond just sending emails, and actually putting myself in those spaces. And I want to do that for you, and I want to pull you into my spaces. So thanks for having me.
Next up, we have Brandon.
All right, good evening everyone. My name is Brandon. I'm running for your future Director of Community Relations. And to answer this question, I went into it thinking that the most important way to build that connection in the first place, Tanya already mentioned it, is actively just being present and making yourself known, making your intentions intentional. And so one of the things I really want to do is actively be seeking feedback 24/7. Feedback makes me go around, feedback makes the world go around, and so actively hosting open forums or just creating anonymous feedback channels or surveys for people who aren't really comfortable to express their thoughts and concerns out loud. Just having those channels for them to communicate with me always, and just letting my intentions be known that I am their liaison and I'm their person to come to any issues or concerns that they may have. And seeing that I've been a part of two of the communities listed on, sorry, three of the communities listed on the screen today, I think just forming that connection of making the connections I already have now through these communities is also a huge part of what I want to do. Just showing up for any meetings, any IFC meetings, panel meetings, MGC meetings, or just any meetings at HFS. I think just making myself known, my presence being able to, and my presence be known is also a huge part. Acknowledging, and at the end of the day, acknowledging my own where my own perspective ends is what it's all about, and remaining committed to learning from the unique challenges that all these communities face. Yeah, thank you so much.
Wow. Okay, my name is Jessica Fan. I'm running on the ticket Huskies Unbound, and I'm so happy to be here with you all. When I saw this question, I thought about the essay that they ask us when we're applying to UW. It asks about your relationship with diversity. And instead of writing about, my own personal background of my culture, I wrote about how I came from a high school that was 50% people of color, 50% white, 50% free and reduced lunch students. And having this background really gave me a different perspective on how many different lived experiences there are among so many other people. I will 100% not be able to know every single experience or every single story of everyone's lives. However, this just means that I have to show up, listen with intention, and work that much harder to build this trust, which is something that I'm willing to do. And, I agree with what Brandon and Tanya said about, putting yourself in these spaces and showing up for these communities. And I would say, I asked to attend these RA meetings. I asked to attend Grand Council with the Greek community, put up posters on apartment doors, and through the President newsletter, reach out to graduate students and reach out, be in their space, aiming to be proactive with open feedback and building a relationship that's just beyond issues, but a genuine relationship that we can have and we can be bonded with. Thank you.
All right, back to Tanya with our second question from GPSS. What are some initiatives that you think you would like to work on related to HFS and the student on-campus experience?
Great. Okay, so as I mentioned, part of our constituents are residential students. So HFS, working with our CSA and HFS, that's a really huge, really big part of my role. And right now, working with Office of Government Relations, we focus a lot on civic engagement and democratic engagement and pulling students into those spaces. And I think working with HFS and our CSA, we could really expand tabling into dorms and residential communities. On my platform, I talk about a non-emergency reporting system and increased campus lighting, which would essentially require collaboration with HFS and our CSA. I really want to advocate for international students as well, and that can include, of course, expanding the legal system and their resources, but also, working with HFS and talking about more diverse meal options. And so I think there's a lot we can do, especially with first-year students, working with them to make sure there are more programs and, first-year program sort of accessibility with our CSA and HFS, and that's properly promoted through those channels because they're very active. But essentially, we've got a lot of great institutions here in place, and I think there's a lot that ASUW could do to be a medium for those institutions and to work with them, provide them resources, and also use our connections with students and our platforms to support HFS and our CSA, implement cafes like Parnassus and more collaboration spaces, and we would really require their support, and I think they could really use ours as well. So I'm excited to do that for you. Thanks so much, and vote UW and Bloom.
Hello, everybody, once again. This is a really good question because there's so much potential. There's just a lot of potential to be had, and some of the few ideas that I had have a lot to do with one, my identity, and also just things I'm passionate about, but also things I haven't mentioned before in previous forums. And so one of the things I'm really big on is wellness, of course. I don't know about you guys, but I think this year is one of the most stressful years of my life. And so just having any wellness-focused activities in any HFS living space is going to go a long way for a lot of these students, especially being their first years or just being whatever the case may be. And so just having those kind of wellness-focused activities and living events is going to be a huge part of what I want to do. And I can say from someone who had the time of his life in McCarty Hall my freshman year, I attended so many events such as movie nights or just lounging in the lounge with my friends, or just having these different activities that are already planned. And so I want to advocate for that as well. And so I also want to have conversations about food equity. I think I experienced firsthand what it's like to have to plan out so many meals throughout my day to make sure that I have the money to support myself, and also just the food to support myself in general. So just having these food security conversations is going to be a huge part of my platform as well. I want to collaborate and strengthen my relationship with HFS and UW Food Pantry in order to strengthen the bond and help students be able to access these basic necessities of life. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, I really like this question because it relates really heavily with something that's on my platform, and to go along with that, I would like to make the transition into UW better. And having this question and prepping for all of my forums from last week, I asked my friends who were in the dorms, I texted them, I talked to them in my classes and all of those things, and I asked them, what could have made your transition into UW better? What could have made living in the dorms better? And there were top 3 things, which is what I would like to address and work with HFS on. The first thing is roommate conflict resolution. I believe that your time in the dorms really, really depends on whether or not you have a strong relationship with your roommate, and getting along with your roommate and putting yourself in their position. You kind of don't know what it's like to live with someone, or you might, but you don't really know what it's like unless you've been through it, to live with someone that you genuinely cannot connect with. And so, bringing in programs like Live Well would be really helpful to kind of provide those resources and tools to have conflict resolution with roommates. I also believe that the Dog Days volunteers should have more training to make their process easier and more efficient, to make every student's process easier and more efficient, as well as the biggest thing I heard was actually images of rooms, of dorms where students would go in. That's how they would pick their dorms, and that's what they need, and I'm here to listen to it. Thank you.
Right. It looks like this question here has the most upvotes. So our audience question is, many of you have mentioned wanting to better engage transfer and commuter students. What specific actionable steps would you take to actively include them in ASUW and help them feel more connected to the broader campus community? And we'll start with Tanya.
Okay, yay, good question. Well, I've talked in the past, these are sort of demographics of students that are harder to involve in ASUW social events, especially if you consider the fact that a lot of them happen in the evenings, and that's really difficult for commuters. But here at the Hub right now, we have a commuter commons, and I think it would be important to have, first year Fridays here at the commuter commons to make sure that commuter students have priority registration access for FIGs, right? Making sure that first year students, it's much easier for them to get here onto campus. I think it's really important that we take advantage of these spaces. One part of my platform is also to expand UPass access into the summer, which I think could be super helpful for commuter students that really take advantage of public transportation. But again, making sure that this sort of integration into the UW climate is really seamless and easy for students. And that does involve building sort of safe cultural spaces for cultural cross-pollination, you can say, here on campus, for transfer students and commuter students, and that hopefully will impact all of our students here on campus. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to welcome all these great demographics. Thank you.
Yeah, so for this question, it's really, I can never imagine just having to just live just what community students and transfer students have to go through. I have the privilege of just being a person who lives on campus and also someone who is from Washington State, and just being able to be integrated into the campus so easily. And so I think one of the few things my ticket, the Wave, really wants to platform for is cheaper parking, one of them being cheaper parking. And so having these commuter students who drive cars being able to access these accessible prices and not having to worry about whether they're going to be able to afford parking throughout the day or just parking throughout the week is something that we want to advocate for a lot, along with other things as well. And so I also want to commit to making a lot more spaces for commuter students to be able to lounge or just be able to just relax throughout the day. I think I've really cherished the downtime throughout the day, and so just having those kind of spaces for them to be able to be integrated into the campus and just being able to meet people who live their same lives is also going to be a huge thing for them as well. Thank you.
Okay, I believe it's like
almost 70% or around 70% of students at UW are commuter students, which is a very large demographic that is most of the time untapped throughout the year. I think that the biggest thing that I would advocate for is working with the provost office to try to find the extra funds to provide free parking during dog days. I believe that if we kick off our year with having this access for commuter students easily approachable and accessible for these students who are driving, it would really encourage them to continue going to these fun events that we host throughout the year. I think that I believe that starting off strong is a really important thing. So just kicking off, having that free parking, and giving back to our students, because I feel as though we often ask a lot of them. I also completely agree with Brandon. I think that we need more downtime spaces and more resources for students who are commuters. Thank you.
Thank you to our candidates. Thank you to our candidates. And next up, and lastly, before the intermission, we'll have the Director of Diversity Efforts candidates. All right. This director coordinates the advocacy, intercommunication, and special funding for the ASUW commissions. They also chair the JCC, which is the Joint Commissions Committee, liaise to the Office of Minority Affairs and Diversity, OMAD, and sit on commission hirings. How will you work to hold a large group of employees and the funds they control accountable to all students, especially those historically marginalized? For example, proper advertising of events and equitable distribution of resources.
Hi everyone, my name is Nebiat Marcos and I'm running for your...
Sorry, I think only that microphone's working right now. My bad.
Hi everyone, my name is Nebiat Marcos and I'm running for Director of Diversity Efforts. And one of the biggest things on my platform is thorough onboarding for all of the student leaders that I will liaison. Something that I really want to continue to cultivate is JCC specific orientation for commission leaders. And I really want to build strong leadership workshops so that these students understand the weight that their roles hold as representatives for all students sharing their identity on campus. Through this thorough onboarding and leadership workshops, I also want to mandate attendance at the RSO leadership summits so that students are able to meet their constituents face to face and also do outreach. And I also want to really thoroughly explain how ASUW funding works. A few of us know how layered ASUW funding can be, and it's important that these leaders who are handling thousands of dollars worth of budgets understand how that budget is being paid, understand things like the JCC fund so that that's being properly utilized since it has historically been underutilized, and also understand how their budgets work because those have been historically underutilized as well, and that's wasteful considering that the student activities fee already pays these X amount of dollars to each commission. I'd also just like to encourage students to relay messages to their constituent base because something that I've been doing as Black Student Commission Director is being very thorough in sharing opportunities and resources for students with my constituents. Thank you.
I think I'm going to focus on the funding aspect of this a little bit more. I think we need more clear and transparent communication on where our funding is going and how to access that funding. I've heard so many conversations about people unaware of understanding how much money that we have, especially in the JCC funds and through the Board of Directors in ASUW, but also where that money is going and how it's being allocated. And so I think we need to create more resources such as websites, flyers, handouts on how to access these funds and how to apply to these to create more accessibility and accessing these funds, but also creating more transparency around how these funds are used and where they're being allocated to. And so kind of creating that clear access to RSOs and to the community on this is where your money is going that you're paying into, and this is how it's being allocated.
All right, and our second question is, given the current political changes happening across the country, which impact changes in funding for some students and concerns around visa status, how will you use your role to provide support to students who face these challenges?
Yeah, so I previously served as Assistant Director of the Office of International Student Advocacy, and in this role, I learned a lot about not only the concerns of international students, but I've also, in my time at JCC currently, I've learned that international students put themselves and their own immigration status at risk if they speak out on these issues sometimes. So I want to really make my time as Director of Diversity Efforts, if elected, I want to make my time utilized as a spokesperson for these JCC voices. I want to put myself at the forefront of these conversations so that, because I'm not an international student, I don't utilize a visa to attend UW, so I would really love to leverage that privilege that I hold. And yeah, for students facing personal and tuition funding issues, I'd love to connect them with the Office of Minority Affairs and Diversity so that they can get streamlined funding that way. And for RSOs, I've learned a lot about how RSOs that identify similarly to marginalized groups struggle with funding very often. So I really want to connect them and assist them with board bill writing and processing, as well as suggest that they do frequent collaborations so that they can have constant community outreach, as well as utilize those collaborations to pay for these events for their RSO constituents. It's just a simple way that they can charge things to ASUW and utilize their budgets so that, again, the money isn't being wasted. Thank you.
So one of the things I really want to push for is to use the unused and already existing funds we have through ASUW and many of the other JCC organizations, etc., to create grants and scholarships for students who may be facing uncertainty, especially with their visas being revoked. That can be used towards getting lawyers, getting housing, and making sure that these kinds of situations that they're placed into unexpectedly is not a hinder on their education. I think also making sure that UW is codifying their promise to ensure that ICE and DHS is not allowed on our campus and not allowed around our students is critical to ensuring the safety of all of our students and to make sure that students feel seen and heard. I think also making sure that resources, as Nebia highlighted, are accessible. So knowing your rights and understanding how you can use those rights in certain situations and your rights as students, as residents and advocates is really, really critical. And so I think making sure knowing your right to workshops, flyers, and information is given to everybody and posted throughout campus to ensure that it is always accessible, and in situations that you need help and you need resources, it's right where you need it.
All right. Our audience question for this position is, the LGBTQ+ community have been targeted by the current presidential administration's policies. As Director of Diversity Efforts, what steps will you take to ensure the safety and inclusion of the LGBTQ+ community here at UW?
This is a great question. I think that it's just a common theme that we're living in really trying times politically, and I really want to, again, really leverage the great amount of JCC commissions that we have already on campus. I'd love to connect students with the Queer Student Commission so that they can find a sense of community and be connected to student leaders who share their identities. And I'd also love to connect students to centers on campus catered directly for this reason. We have so many resources on campus that have been created because not essentially as preventative measures, but because this has historically been an underrepresented group of students on campus and students everywhere. So I really want to make sure that students know about the resources that they have by leveraging the groups that we already have on campus. And my contribution to this can be just sharing the events that they do have and the resources that they already do put out.
I think, again, this kind of goes back to upholding admin's promises to diversity and ensure that they are not complying with federal policies or laws that may hinder and harm our communities, especially the LGBTQ community. And we've seen so much harmful legislation against the trans community. We have to make sure that the university is not complying to those standards, those regulations, those laws. I think also it goes down to creating spaces, especially as we're kind of seeing the shrinking and lack of funding for many spaces and many communities. I think more so than ever, we need to utilize our existing funds and dedicate time, resources, and the ability to create space for these communities and the LGBTQ community specifically. I think as Nebia highlighted, making sure that resources RSO, specifically the commissions, are well funded. They have the ability to use the resources, plan events how they choose without being hindered by the administration or by funding.
Thank you, Nebia and Taylor. Our next thing on the agenda is a 5-minute intermission, and we may or may not come back just a minute early. So talk amongst yourself, get a drink of water if you need, and we'll start back again real soon. And for those that are active senators, the attendance vote is now open, so make sure you get that in. And I encourage you all to move closer to the center of the room. Then you can have more people at your table, more stuff to talk about. You're welcome to discuss anything that the candidates have talked about, as well as our ballot measure. All right, we're going to call it back to order at 6:17 p.m. Hopefully you all got to talk a little bit about the elections or ASUW or your favorite animal or something. And for this half of the forum, we'll start off with Director of Internal Policy. And just so everybody knows, I don't think I announced this before, but if anybody needs transcription or captions, that's available through Teams if you go to senate.asuw.org and then click Join Meeting. All right, and we're going to start this position off with Simon. This director serves as the parliamentarian and the board of directors of the Board of Directors, the Chief Judge of the Judicial Committee, and a member of the Senate Steering Committee and GPSS Executive Committee. These four roles intertwine the branches of UW student governance. The key role of internal policy is to be unbiased on the board. That is the key role, is to be unbiased on the board. How will you remain impartial while ensuring all members adhere to responsibilities found in the governing documents?
Yeah, no, so I'm Simon. Thank you so much for this question. I think it's really imperative to the roles position, as the first sentence obviously says. So I think the biggest part of this is my commitment to governance over ASUW politics. So within the ASUW, these documents are really important to making sure that we are accurately representing the student body. After all, that's why we are here. So I think it's really making sure that I am prioritizing that over my relationships within the ASUW. After all, I'm elected by the student body, so I should be there making sure that I'm accurately representing them through this role. I think another big part of this is actually something that I've studied through leadership theory, and that is this aspect of building relationships as a leader. So this relationship building approach, I think, means being unbiased doesn't have to mean that I have to be distant from our employees and my colleagues. So I think really establishing those relationships within the ASUW, making sure that people can make sure that people feel comfortable coming to me to talk about these types of things, and also that I feel comfortable going, talking to them, and really establishing those relationships is really important. I also think that, if necessary, seeking neutral oversight is really necessary in this role, right? I think being able to take a step back from my role, seeing that maybe it's really difficult for me to be unbiased in a certain situation, and really having that oversight within my role. And then I also think clear decisions through that judicial position, and I'm out of time. Thank you so much.
Hey everybody, my name is Ashwin Anand. I'm running on the ticket Huskies Unbound, and first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. It's half the effort, and hopefully everybody comes out to vote. Ultimately, when looking back at the question, how do we be unbiased, we have to think about what influences bias, right? And in order to be biased, you only favor one side of an argument, and you stick with that narrative for the entirety. My entire campaign is predicated on the fact that I want student representation to be my voice. I want all of US students to come to me in order for me to influence policy. I think a lot of the board of directors I guess in terms of like traditional government has always been biased because they only favor one side of their policy. As director of internal policy, by hosting open forums, quarterly forums, and with students coming back to me with their own feedback, they're telling me what they want to see, and I'm relaying that back to the board of directors. I think communication is one of the biggest parts of student advocacy and lobbying. And so as US students and we as the board of directors, we are in service to you. And so my entire predicated basis of being unbiased is because my voice is your voice. And so ultimately, that's the only way that I plan to be unbiased. And so as director of internal policy, that's one of the major ways that I want to do that. And then when ensuring that all members adhere to the regulations and all of kind of the policies, in terms of transparency, accountability, and making sure that I stand for you. Pretty much it. Thank you.
All right. Our second question is, how will you facilitate education and training for ASUW members on internal policies and procedures to ensure compliance and understanding?
Yeah, once again, thank you so much for this question. I had to take a little second to reflect on this because every single time I've gone in to do research on this position, I go down a rabbit hole of all of our documents because I just get so interested in them. But then I also need to take a second to reflect that these documents can be so obscenely boring through their language. So I was really just reflecting on that and how it's really necessary that we make these trainings interactive and not overwhelming, right? These are large documents, they've got a lot of different terms in them that aren't always easy to understand and like sit down and just read. So really being interactive in these trainings. And I also think that a really good thing that we could use is transition documents. So as a part of ASUW Senate, I am our personnel committee liaison. So this just comes from a little bit of my experience with ASUW, and that there's these transition documents that are written every year by the previous person that held the position. And really just making sure that these positions really understand how they're supposed to be using those documents is really important. And I also think that it's collaboration on embedded policies in their positions. So really, as Director of Internal Policy, understanding how each of these positions need to be using these documents. So then I can communicate that to those individuals. Thank you guys so much for being here.
All right, in order to answer this question, I think we have to look towards the how, right? How are we going to facilitate discussions and kind of increase the amount of awareness and overall education about the policies? As I mentioned, a lot of the policies are very, very expensive. So one of my first step would be to simplify it down and make kind of a guidebook for people to understand. But in order for this guidebook to kind of be expressed and for people to understand that, I guess, these policies exist and that they need to adhere to these policies, is a communication, making sure people are aware that the policies exist. And so by hosting quarterly forums and just getting messaging out there, using the Office of Communications to really push these policies out, these guidebooks out, would be essential. And number two is transparency, right? I guess in my position, I want to bring a little bit of humanity back to the board of directors, to place myself as an equal to all of you as students. So by allowing the feedback to come back to me, I'm able to educate people on policies. And again, I'm not going to have every policy memorized by hand. So if people come to me with the policies or questions, it's my job and responsibility to learn the policy and identify any gaps that are in place. So with you as students, ultimately we're creating a cycle of feedback and improvement on ASUW policies overall, because we together are a team. Me in my position, I'm just here to communicate with the board of directors. So again, your voice is my voice, and ultimately vote Huskies Unbound for UW elections. Thank you.
All right, now we'll move into our audience question, and it looks like the question with the most votes right now is, how do you plan to improve both Senate's representation and reach to administration?
So a really big part of this, I think, is being able to work with our GAFL committee. I'm currently on that committee. So really just understanding how we can utilize that committee and our really outreach as board of directors to work together and connect with administration and ensure that Senate's representation is really being reached out to administration. I also think that a big part of this is just constant communication between the board of directors and Senate. So I am currently a senator, so I hold it close to me. So I think using that as in my role next year is going to be really important to make sure that we are accurately representing the student body, because after all, the ASUW Senate is really, really important to that. So yeah.
All right. To preface, I was a previous senator, and ultimately to ensure that Senate and I guess the board of directors have open transparency and communication, obviously there needs to be platforms in place for Senate to communicate with the board of directors. So me personally, I'm going to be showing up to steering meetings out of my own free will. I'm going to be showing up to Senate meetings out of my own free will. Ultimately, me learning and gaining the feedback from Senate itself allows me to see what policies and what, I guess, problems there are within the ASUW, right? Senate is a very open platform in order for this communication to be in place and for people to propose their own policies. And as these bills obviously get approved and are sent to the board of directors for approval, I'm able to see the process through which the legislation is being created, the problems are being talked about, and also the final product of what the people want. As Director of Internal Policy, my job is to get this codified and guaranteed for not only our generations, but for the generations of Huskies to come. So ultimately, thank you so much for being out here, and vote High Seas on ballot.
Thank you both. All right. Next up, we have Director of University Affairs, if our candidates could come up for this position. And we'll be starting first with Kate. This director is the representative of faculty and administrative initiatives on the board of directors and serves directly or through appointees on each of the faculty councils and faculty senate. You will often be the sole student voice in these meetings. What active steps will you take to advocate on behalf of all students?
All right, hi everyone, my name is Kate Lawson and I'm running on the ticket Huskies Unbound. I really love this question because it touches on something that I actually talk about in my platform that you all have on your voters guides right there. But I'm really interested in taking this idea of DUA office hours and creating something that actually serves students. Instead of sitting in my office and hanging around waiting for people to come talk to me, I'm interested in getting out into the community. I'm planning on dedicating time every single week in my role to go and attend club meetings, to participate in affinity spaces, to be someone that exists not as a representative of ASUW, but as a representative of the students to ASUW, making sure that all student voices are heard, whether that's working with my lovely Director of Diversity Efforts, Valeria, on things like coordinating with Purple Group for undocumented students and students on visas in order to protect their rights as international students, or working with some of the incredible groups like our Panhellenic councils and organizations like that to make sure that their voice is heard. So thank you so much.
Next up, we have Alice. I'll read the question again for you. You will often be the sole student voice in these meetings, those meetings being the faculty councils and faculty senate. What active steps will you take to advocate on behalf of all students?
Great, thank you. Hi guys, my name is Alice and I'm very excited to be running as your next ever Director of University Affairs. And how I'll make sure that students' voices are represented is that I will host multiple intersectional listening sessions where students are able to come and give their feedback and ideas on key discussions and decisions that are being made in faculty and administrative committees. But of course, I can't expect students to always come to me. It's what I can do for them, not what they can do for me. So I also plan on attending RSO and community organization meetings whose missions and values align with initiatives that can be taken in committees. For example, I would attend commuter student meetings, and I would talk to them about the UPass advisory board and what initiatives and discussions they can bring up to help them further their mission for having equitable transportation to campus. And in all of this, I will also have to appoint representatives to a few committees because, of course, I don't have the bandwidth to sit on like all 20 of them. And that's historically been, I know I've said this a lot, it's historically been internal hiring where people do not know about these opportunities, so only ASUW representatives are hired, and I would love to make it external to represent more diverse voices. Thank you.
And finally, we have Toa.
Hi everyone, my name is Toa. My pronouns are she, her, and of course I'm running for Director of University Affairs. This is a super important question. I think it's really important to recognize that even with someone who's elected to the board of directors, as UA, there's going to be an inherent power difference when it comes to talking to faculty and administration. But I have experience in situations that are kind of similar to this. So I'm an intern with the Office of Government Relations, and I've personally done some work testifying before the state legislature, as well as lobbying directly to state legislators. And I've really seen the impact that individual students' stories has in those situations. These people are in power, it's taken them a long time to get there, and they're really far removed from what's important to students. So I really think that the key thing here is to bring in individual students who can share their experiences and why certain policies and issues are important to them. And as far as policies that I would implement to really try to center that, I'm interested in creating a stakeholder database which would basically look like having a list of different RSOs, groups, and even individual students who are particularly relevant to or passionate about certain issues. And then when something along the lines of that issue comes up with admin or even just within ASUW, this doesn't have to be a DUA exclusive thing, those people could be contacted and given resources for how they can use their voice and really advocate for the things they care about. Thank you so much.
All right, our second question is, how will you build relationships with faculty and administrators to better understand their perspectives and collaborate on initiatives that benefit students?
Thank you so much for this question. This is something that I've had a lot of experience with in some of my previous roles, whether that's heading up RSOs. I'm actually the communications director for the Pi Sigma Alpha Political Science Honor Society here on campus, and a big part of my role is collaborating with faculty and making sure that they know what political science students need in our department. Something that we had the ability to organize this year was a faculty-student dinner, where we were able to deliver over 50 students the opportunity to speak with faculty directly, talk about research opportunities, improvements for the department, and things of that nature. And I love to bring experiences like that into the community as a whole. Going to these faculty meetings and saying, hey, would you guys like to get out into the community? Would you guys like to participate? How can we facilitate those meetings? Students are hungry for the ability to talk to their faculty members as if they're friends, as if they're people that they can collaborate with on research projects, on initiatives, on creating a better UW. And I'm really interested in bringing those opportunities to the students and making proposals like that. And I'm super grateful to have had experience working with that so I can hit the ground running on day one and make those things happen. Thank you so much, and vote Huskies Unbound.
How will you build relationships with faculty and administrators to better understand their perspectives and collaborate on initiatives that benefit students?
Perfect, thank you. Firstly, I will work to prioritize shared goals between students and faculty, just to immediately go right off the bat with a middle ground, just to help more productive conversations happen. And I will actively work to learn the institutional context behind decisions and ideas that faculty members may have, such as budget constraints, because like students, they're more likely to engage in productive conversations with me if I show that I have done the work to see their viewpoint and to step into their shoes. And disagreements are bound to occur in any shared governance space. I was appointed by Anna Marie Kelsey to be on the anti-Semitism committee last year as the undergraduate representative, and it was my first time having experience speaking directly to faculty members and administrators, and to be honest, I did get tone policed very often, and that's because the administration or faculty members, sometimes they see any sign of discontentment as a sign of disrespect, and while it's pertinent for students to be able to voice their opinions without being tone policed, it's also important to understand the context in which you're stepping into and to almost acclimate to their standards in order to successfully voice student ideas. Thank you.
Hi, again. I'm really interested in taking a policy-first approach to this consideration, as with a lot of issues. One thing that I think is really important with this role is building credibility. I think that's really the objective of the Director of University Affairs position, kind of centralizes how we create relationships with faculty and administration. And also, part of the Director of University Affairs position is, as was mentioned, I believe, appointing students to faculty councils. And I really believe that we can't build that credibility that we need in this position without showing up to those meetings. So an issue that I'm really focused on is amending the open selection process, which, if you're not aware, currently the open selection process requires there to be 3 applicants for a faculty senate position for the position to be filled. I think this is super well-intentioned. It really tries to get the best candidate, but the reality is that we don't always have 3 candidates. And so these positions don't get filled. To the extent that faculty senate has, I don't want to say threatened, but floated the idea of taking away student seats on faculty councils. And I think it's absolutely critical that that doesn't happen. Those seats are already non-voting, and we really, really need to make sure that they remain in place. So I think the first step to building credibility is, as I said, showing up and amending the open registration process to make that possible. Yeah, thank you so much, and vote for UW in Blue.
All right, now for our audience question. The question that's been selected by the crowd is, how will you work to protect UW students from the ongoing attacks by the federal government against students and the higher education institution as a whole?
Yeah, so this is an incredible question, and I really appreciate you all bringing it up because it gives me the chance to talk about my partner, Valeria, who's running for Director of Diversity Efforts along with me. And we have a multi-pronged approach to this. Using the Office of Government Relations, which the Director of University Affairs oversees as part of ASUW Board of Directors, we are going to work to make sure that student voices are not only protected, but also that they're secure and that they're not given out to people who could abuse those powers. So doing things like having an anonymous reporting system where people are able to share their stories in an anonymous way, come to me, come to Valeria, and discuss what's going on, and then we can relay that to legislators, to faculty and staff, and make sure that they're able to secure the university so that that information is not getting out and our students are not victimized. I know Neviat mentioned this before, but a lot of students who are on student visas and who don't have the ability, sorry, I'm running out of time, but thank you so much.
Thank you for this question. What I would do is, firstly, I would use my position in the faculty committee on tri-campus policy to try and create kind of an emergency type of bill that spans over all 3 campuses that protects students from any, any challenges against their residence in the United States. And like Kate said, I would allow undocumented and immigrant students to come to me anonymously, and if they are comfortable with it, share their voice in faculty committee meetings or lobbying with state representatives down in Olympia without compromising their identity, because of course that is the most important, that's the most important goal out of everything. But yeah, thank you.
Hi, what I really like about this question is that it explicitly acknowledges right where the problem is coming from, which is the federal government. And we've seen with the cases of Columbia and what's happening with Harvard and Princeton, that the federal government's biggest tool when it comes to pressuring universities is funding. And so with that, I think that when we're looking at this question, we need to think about ways that we can bulletproof this school as much as we can against threats to federal funding. And in large part, that looks like defending funding on the state level, working to make sure that universities don't face policies like one that is currently proposed in the state legislature, which would make it a lot harder for a lot of schools to get tuition from students because it would decrease enrollment. If you know, you know. But anyway, I really think that focusing on funding here through lobbying work with OGR, as Kate mentioned, is super important. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, we have our vice presidential candidates. The Vice President acts as the Chief Operations Officer of the ASUW, working with the Personnel Director to serve staff needs. They also serve on several committees and chair meetings of the Executive Officer team. How will you coordinate with the directors on the board to ensure students are properly represented and engaged from all communities?
Yeah, wonderful question and explanation of the job. I currently serve as the personnel director, so this is right up my alley. But my name is Sonal Burke, and I'm running on the Huskies Unbound ticket. The main part of serving as the Chief Operational Officer of the organization is ensuring that not only are our communities being served externally, but ensuring that our directors are being able to voice their concerns internally within our organization. A big part of my job this year as a personnel director was to mediate these conversations. They were confidential, but also very productive with all of our directors, and I wasn't dismissing the fact that there is room for improvement within our organization, and that is something that I'm willing to take into the next administration if elected as your next student body vice president. And I'm aware of the culture within ASUW, including more transparency and accountability, and on the board especially, and the organization must progress. So there was a survey conducted as well through our organization. A big part of students not returning was because of poor leadership. So that is the core responsibility for us to improve, is to improve the leadership and to improve how we are communicating with our directors and making it more welcoming and making sure that we are being proactive about setting up times to meet with every single director alongside the president as well, and the next year's personnel director and the president running on Huskies Unbound with me, and then on JV. We will work collectively to ensure that we are having this proactive outreach and this proactive conversation. Thank you. I'm out of time.
Let me know if you'd like me to read the question.
Hi everyone, I'm Jenna. Of course, I'm running for vice president on the UW Blue ticket. Please excuse me, I'm a little bit under the weather. But I think when it comes to speaking about representation and engagement within ASUW, a big part of that has to come within the board of directors and our communication within all of us. As the vice president, one of my things that I have to do is meet with each board of director candidate and have those conversations about what is going well and checking in on a quarterly basis. However, I plan on doing that more than just on a quarterly basis. I want to do it at least monthly, if not more often than that, to ensure accountability with the board of directors, as well as what successes and what other groups we need to be reaching out to. For example, I want to work with our director of programming, so on the UW Blue ticket, that's Rhiannon. As Eric mentioned earlier, she is really into making sure that all of our events are accessible. And so in creating engagement and representation within ASUW, I think if we can make our events as accessible as possible, that's going to make our events more engaging for students, and all students can actually come to our events. Also, I want to work with our Director of Community Relations and our Director of Diversity Efforts to ensure that we're reaching out to communities like transfer students and undocumented students and international students, and having that really intentional outreach with them. So whether that's thinking about how we can lobby for them with our Office of Government Relations and our UW Federal Relations team, and how me and my running partner, Andal, for president, have...
All right, for our second question from GPSS, how will you balance potential interpersonal conflict and the diverse interests of directors and staff?
Yeah, I love this question because as the personnel director this year and an HR major, a huge part of my job and my profession is to mediate conversations. So throughout my experiences so far and what I've learned throughout the courses that I've taken is to be a pro mediator, to hear both sides. And we often hear within workplaces that we shouldn't take things personal, but when you are representing such diverse communities here at the University of Washington, it is especially important to acknowledge these diverse interests, to acknowledge our directors and what they need. We cannot dismiss the fact that they need us to represent them to the highest extent. Having those conversations, again, being proactive, being able to see both sides is the first step. And then from there, I know that throughout my conversations with our directors this year, I presented a lot of historically what we've done, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and I got their insight. I was like, how can we change? How can we become better? Because there's always room for improvement. And they gave me their insight, and I took that, and I took it to the board, and we tried our best to make these decisions, but sometimes that wasn't enough. So leading into the next administration, I would love to bring in more insights, and from the past experiences within the ASUW this past year, it's especially important to lead with empathy and to lead with the mission statement of being open. We consistently say we are by the students, for the students, yet we dismiss our own directors sometimes. So leading with that mission statement is key to ensure that all of our directors are welcome to voice their needs for their individual communities here on campus. Thank you, and remember to vote Huskies Unbound.
I think what Sonal said about being a mediator is really important, but I also hope that with within the position that I don't have to be a mediator as much as possible. I want to make sure that we are facilitating that conversation, like I said previously, between our board of directors candidates and all of our other communities on campus. And so when it comes to the board of directors and other staff within ASUW, I definitely don't want to have this be an us versus them, with the board of directors coming in with certain views and then the other commissions coming with certain views. I want to be able to facilitate that conversation earlier so that we don't have these large conflicts that are going to misrepresent and disproportionately affect student populations. Because ultimately, we are all working within ASUW. We all want to support and amplify student voices. We all want to represent students as best as possible. And so it's imperative that we all do work together. I don't think that our differences need to be divisive in how we're making policy or what we're going about in student communities. I think that it can be a really good opportunity, actually, for us to represent all of our communities as best as possible by talking to each other, by making sure that we are attending things like the Student Senate and hearing from those voices, and attending things and talking to graduate students from GPSS. I think that we all, with this amazing and facilitated conversation, we won't have to have these big arguments and have to have these big mediation events. Thank you.
All right, I'll give just one more second for people to upvote because we're currently tied. Okay, and there's our question. What do you think is the most important duty of the ASUW Vice President? How do you intend to fulfill this task?
Yeah, for sure. So we consistently keep hearing Chief Operational Officer. What does that mean? In other words, Chief of Staff, making sure that our organization is running at the highest optimal level is key. Making sure that our organizations are being served is key. And so making sure that we have the communication with our directors internally, getting their insight for our next, like for example, fiscal year. What does that look like for you guys? What do we look like in the upcoming years? Making sure that we are reducing our deficit, making sure that we are keeping our organization going within the next couple of years, because the student government is needed on our campus. And putting that at the forefront, making sure that our organization is running as effectively and efficiently as possible for our internal ASUW commissions and entities, and also our external RSOs, is how I would approach this job, and it is in the job title as well. So making sure everything internally is working as best as possible so that it becomes easier to work within our ASUW and to represent our diverse student population. Thank you.
When I think of like what's most important for our ASUW Vice President, I think of accountability and making sure that our other directors and our board of directors are being held accountable for, one, the platforms that they are running under and what students have voted them in for, and secondly, just for continuing to create success in what they're trying to do. And so in creating accountability, like I said earlier, I want to have these constant check-in meetings where we're discussing what hasn't gone well and what has gone well, and making sure that we can communicate with as many different diverse groups as possible, creating accountability in like which groups we're actually reaching out to. So if I'm trying to work on accessibility, reaching out to the Office of Inclusive Design, reaching out to the D Center, and making sure that we are engaging with all of those student groups and communities, with myself, but also with our board of directors. As VP, you are the Chief Operating Officer, as Sonal said, so really facilitating that ASUW communication is going to be incredibly important in keeping accountability for myself and all the rest of the board of directors. Thank you. Vote UW in blue.
And last but certainly not least, we have the ASUW president. The ASUW president is the representative of all students on campus and serves a key role both within ASUW as a member of all committees and as a representative to UW administration, faculty, and leaders of each UW campus. What will you do as ASUW president to make the organization more relevant to the wider student body, for example, events, goals, initiatives, or advocacy areas?
I think we can learn so much from student governments across the country with a lot more reach with their students. For example, the UC schools and ASUC, and I think that starts with providing services to students with wide appeal, whether that be microwaves, providing our own microwaves for students to use in the hub, printing services. ASUW efforts a couple years ago included an off-campus housing search website, which kind of went defunct, and I'd really like to bring that back along with housing fairs. And reviving Parnassus Cafe, which Tanya, who I'm running with, is working on. And another thing I really want to do is increase departmental outreach, because there's so many issues going on in different departments that we don't hear about when we're kind of siloed off as mostly political science students. I've talked in previous forums about DEI councils in my department, electrical and computer engineering, and I'd like to implement that in more departments across campus. Also, just making sure to get out and reach out to students who are often left out of conversations. Students with dependents, commuters, transfers, and particularly international students. I grew up internationally, and I know how hard it is to transition to living here. So Know Your Rights workshops are particularly important right now, as well as collaborating with circles to provide events to make sure international students feel like they have a home here.
And for our second question, how will you prioritize transparency and accountability within ASUW, ensuring that students are informed about organizational decisions and actions?
So over the last 2 years in Senate leadership, this has been one of my primary focuses in Senate. I've made sure records have been up to date, made leadership a lot more approachable, and meetings more accessible, and created a lot of students or resources for students to be able to write their own legislation. And I've seen the impact. I think Senate is pretty unrecognizable from what it was 2 years ago. But the number one thing I want to do is to take the ASUW website and make it a centralized resource, consolidate information on changing federal policies and how they impact students, RSO events and events on campus, and all campus resources, and making it as digestible and accessible as possible in different languages too. And we 100% have the staffing and funding to be able to do this. Another thing I've been inspired by is the Gavel Committee in Senate, and I think it's honestly crazy that we don't have an equivalent of that in ASUW. We need our interns, coordinators, and board members to be following up on legislation. Something I like about Senate this year is we've really empowered students or sponsors of legislation to take charge of the follow-up themselves and equipping them with the resources they need to do that and connections. Something else is the RCSA inquiry system, and I'd really like to implement a version of that in ASUW. Thank you.
All right, I'll give a couple more seconds for people to pull in on their favorite question. And just as a reminder, this will be our last question of the evening. We're feeling really indecisive today. Okay, well, we'll go with this question. With the inner conflict that has occurred within ASUW this year, how do you plan to rebuild trust within the ASUW?
Thank you for this question. I think the number one thing leading up to this conflict is just carrying over a lot of kind of stereotypes and ideas from previous years, and I think we need to start fresh next year, really. And that starts from orientation, really focusing on team building activities and putting off information into like an offline, like more accessible digital version of that. I think our offices are split between 121 and 131, and we don't communicate nearly enough between that. We need to be having monthly all-staff meetings at least, and I would really make an effort to go out and communicate individually with every single ASUW employee, and also use Senate as a space to meet and work together on legislation. I think working together on a project really builds a lot of camaraderie.
Thank you, Wendell. All right, that concludes our last question for the evening. And before you all leave, I wanted to remind everybody that next year we will have a Senate representative on the board of directors with a voting seat. This is going to be the first time this has ever been a thing, and that will start us off in 2025, 2026 on a really good note. That was approved the previous year in the 2024 proposal constitution, which stipulates this Senate representative will continue on to be the vice speaker of the Student Senate. And it kind of reflects moving towards a system like GPSS has, where they also have had a voting seat on the board for many years. And we hope to continue building that relationship between the board, Senate, and GPSS across the campus. Thank you all for attending. And just last but not least, I wanted to make sure that you all are aware of the ASUW Fair this Friday. It'll be 12 to 4 on the hub lawn just right outside. You can fill out this RSVP just so that people are aware of how many of you will be attending. And you can follow us on all of our Instagram accounts. And thank you to the organizations that help support this event. Have a great night. Are there any motions? I recognize Autumn. Is there a second? Aiden seconds the motion to adjourn. Are there any objections? Seeing no objections, taking it to a vote. All those in favor? All those against? And all those abstaining? We are adjourned at 6:59 p.m. As you leave the room, please make sure to take away all of your plates. Any leftover food can be placed on some of the tables closest to the doors. That'll really help us clean up. And you're welcome to toss the name tags.